I found out about my husband's affair because of a phone bill. Not even my own. The family plan. It was late on a Wednesday night, and I was paying bills online. Nothing unusual. I was halfway through when I noticed a number that appeared over and over again on his line. Always in the evenings, sometimes during work hours, sometimes after midnight. At first I thought maybe it was a coworker, but then I saw the duration of the calls, 20, 30, 40 minutes, sometimes twice in the same night. I didn't recognize the number, so I typed it into Google. No business listings, no spam reports, just a name on a Facebook account. A woman. Young, pretty, living in the same city. I clicked through her profile, scrolling past smiling pictures and tagged friends, but nothing told me why my husband was calling her for hours at a time. My hands were cold, but I kept scrolling. She had a dog. She went to concerts. And 3 weeks ago, she had posted a picture of her drink at a bar I knew very well, because it was 5 minutes from his office. I stared at the screen for a long time, not moving, not blinking. Then I heard the garage door. He was home. When he walked in, he smelled like the outside air and faint cologne. His tie was loose, and he kissed my forehead without really looking at me. I remember thinking how automatic it felt, like something you do out of habit, but not because you want to. I didn't say anything. We ate dinner like nothing was wrong. He told me about a meeting that went too long. I told him about a problem with the dishwasher. Every word felt like it was floating in the air, disconnected from us. And all the while, the number was in my head, flashing like a warning light. After dinner, he went upstairs to shower. I stayed at the table, staring at my phone. My first thought was to call the number right then, but I didn't. I wanted to hear how he'd talk to her when he wasn't expecting it, so I saved the number in my contacts under a fake name, Mike S., and waited. The next day, he left for work early. I watched his car pull out of the driveway before I called. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was light, friendly. She said hello like she knew the person on the other end. I didn't speak, and after a few seconds, she said his name. Not sir, not mister, but his first name in a soft, familiar way. Then she hung up. I sat there with the phone still to my ear, staring at nothing. She knew his number by heart. She expected his call. I didn't confront him that night, or the next. I needed to be sure. So I started watching him more closely. When he texted, I tried to see the screen. When he left the room to take a call, I noted how long he was gone. It all added up. The late returns from work, the sudden need for client dinners, the times he put his phone face down on the counter. One night, he fell asleep on the couch with his phone in his hand. I slid it away from him slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I went straight to his messages. I didn't even have to scroll far. There she was. Long threads of texts, some just a few words, some paragraphs. Inside jokes I didn't understand. References to places they'd been. And one message from her that stopped me cold. Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about it. I don't remember how long I sat there. He was breathing heavily beside me, oblivious. My first instinct was to wake him and scream. But instead, I put the phone back exactly where it had been. I wanted to know how far this had gone, how long it had been happening. I wanted the full picture before I said a word. The next day, I followed him. I told him I had a lunch meeting across town, but really, I parked near his office. At exactly 6:30, he came out. He didn't get in his car. Instead, he walked 2 blocks to that same bar from the woman's Facebook photo. I stayed in my car and watched as she walked in. She smiled at him in a way I hadn't seen in years. Full, open, like she was genuinely happy just to see him. They sat at a small table near the window. From where I was, I couldn't hear them, but I could see everything. The way he leaned in when she talked, the way she touched his arm without hesitation. After 40 minutes, they left together. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him right away. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to choose the exact moment that would hurt him most. But then I walked into the kitchen, and there, on the counter, was a small white box with a ribbon. Inside was a necklace, a gift for me. No note, no special occasion, just sitting there, waiting. And that was the first moment I wasn't sure who the gift was really for. I stood in the kitchen with the necklace in my hands, turning it over and over. It was simple, silver, something I would have picked for myself. The ribbon was still neatly tied, the kind of bow you see when something comes straight from a store. I tried to remember if I had mentioned wanting a necklace lately. I had not. We had not talked about gifts at all. In fact, we had been saving money, or at least that is what I thought. A piece like this was not cheap. I put it back in the box and placed it on the counter exactly where it had been. When he came in from the garage, I was already at the stove. He noticed the box and smiled. He said it was just because. I smiled back and said thank you. My voice, even. Inside, I was counting every possibility. Maybe he bought it to ease his guilt. Or maybe it was meant for her, and he changed his mind. He kissed my cheek and asked if I liked it. I told him yes. I wanted him to believe I was still the same wife who trusted him. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened his laptop. He never logged out of anything, but lately, I had noticed he started clearing his history. I went to his email. In the sent folder, there were only work-related messages, too clean. Then I checked the trash. Empty. I was about to close it when I remembered something. The cloud storage account we both use for sharing family photos. I opened it and started scrolling. At first it was the usual, pictures from holidays, our anniversary, my niece's birthday. Then, buried in a random folder, I saw images that did not belong. They were not explicit, but they were of her. Candid shots in a park, her holding a coffee, smiling into the camera. Photos that had no reason to be there. The timestamps matched the days he had told me he was working late. I shut the laptop quickly and sat in the dark, listening to his breathing from the bedroom. I kept seeing her face in my mind, relaxed, happy. I could not remember the last time I looked like that around him. The next morning, I acted normal. I made coffee, asked about his meetings, kissed him goodbye at the door. As soon as he left, I called my friend Laura. I told her only that I needed her to watch the kids that evening, no details. She agreed without asking questions. I spent the day rehearsing what I might say to him when I finally confronted him. But every version felt wrong. If I screamed, he would shut down. If I cried, he might pity me. I wanted neither. I wanted the truth, without excuses. That evening, he texted me that he would be late again. A client at dinner. I told him I understood. Then I drove to the bar near his office, the same one where I had seen them before. I parked across the street. He arrived at 6:20. 5 minutes later, she walked in. Same smile, same easy touch on his arm as they sat down. I watched them for nearly an hour. At one point, he leaned in and whispered something that made her laugh so hard she covered her mouth. It hit me that I could not remember the last time I had heard him laugh like that with me. They left together, but instead of parting ways like last time, they walked to his car. He opened the door for her. She got in. My stomach dropped. I followed them. It was easier than I thought. He drove across town to a quiet residential street and parked in front of a small house. She got out first, glancing around briefly before walking up to the door. He followed her inside without looking back. I sat there for a long time. 10 minutes. 20. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. Finally, I started the car and drove away. I knew if I stayed, I might do something I would regret. When I got home, the necklace was still on the counter. I picked it up and put it in my dresser drawer. I did not want to see it anymore. The rest of the night, I could not stop thinking about that house. Was it hers? Did he help pay for it? How many times had he been there? The next morning, I asked him casually if his dinner had gone well. He said yes, then gave me a quick kiss and left for work. No mention of being with her. No mention of the house. I decided I needed more information. I called Laura again and asked if she knew anyone who lived on that street. She did not, but she offered to help me look. Together, we searched property records online until we found it. The house was rented. The lease was under her name. That answered one question, but raised more. If she had her own place, then what exactly was their plan? Was she just a fling? Or was he preparing for something bigger? I thought about hiring a private investigator. I even looked up a few local agencies. But the idea of a stranger knowing this part of my life felt unbearable. So I decided to do it myself. Over the next week, I tracked his movements whenever I could. I made excuses to leave work early. I arranged extra play dates for the kids. I learned his patterns. When he truly had meetings, when he was with her. Every detail was another piece of the puzzle. And then, on a Thursday afternoon, I saw something I had not expected. He was with her again, but they were not at her house or the bar. They were at a jewelry store. I parked far enough away so they would not see me. They went inside together and stayed for nearly half an hour. When they came out, she had a small bag in her hand. He was smiling. I drove home without following them further. I did not need to know what was in that bag. My mind was already filling in the possibilities, none of them good. That night, he came home early. He was in a good mood, talking about how the quarter at work was going well. I nodded, pretending to listen, my eyes drifting toward the drawer where I had hidden the necklace. Now I was certain. The gift on my counter last week had not been random. It had been part of a pattern. But whether it was for me or a cover for something he gave her, that was still the question. And I knew the only way to get that answer was to make him think I still had no idea. The night after I saw him at the jewelry store, I lay awake next to him, pretending to sleep. He fell asleep quickly, breathing evenly, one arm over his pillow. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the entire week in my head. Every small smile he had given her, every late-night call, every lie delivered without hesitation. By morning, I had decided I needed to get inside that house, not just to confirm what I already knew, but to see how much of his life existed there. I needed to know if I was sharing him with a fantasy or with a second home. I waited 2 days. On Saturday, he told me he was meeting a friend for golf. He left wearing his casual polo and a cap, carrying the same gym bag he always took. I watched him from the upstairs window as he drove away, then waited another 10 minutes before leaving myself. When I reached her street, his car was already there, parked in the driveway. I drove past once, slowly, pretending to be looking for an address. The curtains in the front window were drawn, but I could see a faint light inside. I parked 2 blocks away and sat in the car, trying to decide how far I was willing to go. Eventually, I got out and walked past her house on the opposite sidewalk. From that angle, I could see part of the living room. He was sitting on the couch, leaning toward her, his hand on her knee. She was laughing, holding a mug. I kept walking, turning the corner before my legs gave out. I knew I could not stand there all day, but I could not leave without more. I circled back after an hour. His car was still there. This time, I stopped in front of the driveway. My heart was pounding, but my face was calm. I took out my phone, pretended to type a text, and glanced toward the window again. Now they were sitting closer, his arm along the back of the couch. She rested her head against it. I walked away before either of them could notice me. The urge to knock on the door was almost overwhelming, but I did not. Not yet. Back in my car, I wrote down the time. 11:23. Then I drove to a cafe nearby and waited. At 12:52, I saw his car pass by. I followed from a distance. He drove straight home, parked in the garage, and came inside with the same casual greeting as if nothing had happened. "How was golf?" I asked. He said it was fine. The weather was perfect. No mention of her. No hint of anything unusual. I stood there looking at him, wondering how many times he had done this without me knowing. That night, I decided to check his phone again. He had changed the passcode. The next day, I tried his laptop. The browser was clear, no history at all. His email had been scrubbed again. Every trace of her was being erased more carefully now. It was as if he sensed I was getting closer. But he had overlooked something. The cloud account still synced automatically from his phone. He probably thought I'd forgotten about it. Or maybe he believed I never checked it without telling him. Either way, it had been set up years ago to back up everything automatically, and he'd never changed the settings. When I logged in, I saw a new folder. Inside were pictures from the past week. Her in a black dress, standing next to him at a table in a dimly lit restaurant. Another of her holding a small box, smiling. The same kind of box I had seen her carrying outside the jewelry store. I stared at that picture for a long time. The angle told me he had taken it himself. She was looking directly at him when he pressed the button. I saved the images to my own device and closed the laptop. My hands were steady, but my breathing wasn't. The following evening, I told him I had plans with Laura and would be home late. I left early and drove to her house again. This time, there were no cars in the driveway. I walked up to the porch and stood there, listening. No sound. I tried the door. Locked. I walked around the side, my shoes crunching softly on the gravel. The backyard was small, fenced, but the gate was open. I stepped inside. Through the back door's glass, I could see the kitchen. On the counter was a framed picture, the two of them sitting close together, smiling at the camera. His arm was around her shoulders. It hit me that he had posed for a picture in another woman's home, and he had let her display it openly. I turned away before I could see more. As I left the yard, I noticed something else. a pair of men's sneakers by the back step. They were his size. I drove home without stopping. When I walked in, he was on the couch, watching TV. He muted it and asked how my evening was. I told him it was fine. I could feel the words sitting on the edge of my tongue, ready to spill, but I swallowed them. For the next few days, I acted exactly as before. I laughed when he made a joke. I asked about his work. I let him kiss me goodbye each morning. But inside, I was counting down. I knew the exact moment I would confront him. Not with suspicion, not with questions, but with proof. The proof was in that picture on her counter, in the sneakers by her back step, in the hours he thought were hidden. And the closer I got to that moment, the more careful I had to be to make sure he never saw it coming. The next morning, I woke up with a clear decision in my mind. I was done collecting scraps here and there. I needed everything in one place, every date, every receipt, every image. Something I could put in front of him without giving him the chance to twist it. I started with the cloud account. I logged in and downloaded every single picture where she appeared. Not just the obvious ones, even the ones where she was only in the background, or where her hand was in the frame holding a drink. I saved them into a new folder on my computer, then transferred them to an external hard drive. I renamed each file with the date and timestamp. When I was finished with the pictures, I opened our phone bill and went through 6 months of call logs. Every time her number appeared, I highlighted it in red. The result was a sheet where red lines bled through almost every page. Long calls, short calls, some after midnight, others in the middle of his workday. I could see entire weeks where there wasn't a single day they hadn't spoken. Next came the bank and credit card statements. I filtered by merchant name. The bar near his office showed up so many times I stopped counting. The jewelry store came up 3 times in the past month. 2 in-person charges, 1 online order. The amounts were enough to make my chest tighten. I took screenshots of everything and printed them out. Maybe he assumed I'd stopped looking, or maybe he thought a few charges here and there would blend in with our regular expenses. Either way, he was careless enough to leave a trail I could follow. By the time the printer finished, the dining table was covered. Pictures, call logs, credit card statements, all laid out in chronological order. Looking at them like this, there was no doubt. It wasn't a fling. It was a second relationship running parallel to mine. I put everything into a thick manila envelope and slid it into the back of a cookbook we never used. Then I copied the files to a flash drive and hid it in a box of old greeting cards in the closet. If he tried to erase something again, I would still have the proof. All day, I acted like nothing had changed. I texted him about the kids' homework, asked if he needed anything from the store. He said he had a busy day and might work late again. I told him to grab dinner on the way home. He replied with a casual, "Will do." I stared at the message for a long time before putting my phone down. That afternoon, I called the jewelry store. I told the woman on the phone that I was reviewing charges for insurance and needed to know the items bought on certain dates. She asked for the card details and confirmed there were 3 recent purchases: a silver necklace, a gold bracelet, and a ring that had been shipped directly to an address in the east part of town. She read me the street name. It was hers. I thanked her and hung up. My hand stayed on the phone for a while. The necklace was in my dresser. The bracelet I'd never seen. The ring was hers, and it hadn't been bought in a hurry. It was ordered and shipped. That meant planning. I drove to her street just before sunset. Her car was in the driveway, but his wasn't. I walked past on the opposite sidewalk, keeping my head down like I was checking my phone. She was in the kitchen. Her hair was pulled back, and when she reached for something on a high shelf, I saw it. A ring on her left hand. It caught the light as she moved. I didn't need to see the details to know what it was. I kept walking until I reached the corner. My hands were steady, but my stomach felt hollow. Back in the car, I opened the Notes app and typed, "Ring on her left hand, 5:47 p.m. Then I added, "Do not confront in anger." I read that second line twice before locking the phone. That night, he came home around 9 with takeout in a paper bag. He said the meeting had gone long. I asked how it went, and he gave me the same vague answer as always. Fine, productive, glad to be home. I set his food on a plate, sat across from him, and watched him eat. He didn't notice. In the morning, he mentioned a work trip for next week. 2 nights away, Wednesday to Friday, for a client presentation. I asked where. He said Denver. He added that he'd send me the flight details once he got to the airport. I nodded like that was fine. After he left, I checked the airline account we both used. No bookings under his loyalty number. I checked his email. No confirmations. I called Laura and asked if she could take the kids Wednesday night for a home project I needed to do. She agreed right away. I didn't explain. Later that day, I drove to his office building and parked where I could see the lobby. I waited until lunch. He came down with a coworker, crossed the street, and went into a cafe. No sign of her. I felt like I was wasting time. I drove away, stopped at a stationery store, and bought a black notebook. That night, I started writing. Dates, times, addresses, no guesses, no feelings. Only facts I could prove. I listed each time I'd seen them together, every charge linked to her, every piece of evidence from the cloud account. Then I made a second list of yes or no questions. Did he buy her a ring? Yes. Did he use our joint account for gifts? Yes. Did he lie about where he was? Yes. On Tuesday, I visited a lawyer. I told her I wasn't ready to file, but needed to know what to document. She said to keep collecting evidence, not to confront him yet, and to think about arrangements for the children. She spoke in a calm, steady tone, as if this was routine for her. That night, he seemed unusually warm. He suggested watching a movie together. He put his arm around me. I let him. My eyes stayed on the screen, but my mind was on the manila envelope in the cookbook. Wednesday morning, he packed a small suitcase and said he'd call me from the airport. The garage door closed behind him. 5 minutes later, I checked the airline apps again. Still no booking. At noon, I drove to the bar near his office and asked the manager to reserve a table for Friday. He wrote my name in his book. I asked, as casually as I could, if my husband had been there recently with clients. The man hesitated, then said he didn't keep the track of guests. I thanked him and left. I drove straight to her street. His car was in the driveway. He was supposed to be flying to Denver. I parked 2 blocks away and wrote the time in my notebook. 12:43 p.m., car in her driveway. I didn't get out. I didn't need to. That evening, he texted to say he'd landed and would be in meetings until late. I sent back, okay. Nothing more. Thursday was quiet. He sent me a heart emoji in the afternoon. I looked at it for a long time before closing the thread. I took the necklace out of my dresser and laid it on the bed. I stared at it like it was a receipt. Then I put it back. By Friday morning, everything was ready. The table was set, the manila envelope tucked under his plate. Laura had the kids for a sleepover. I kept glancing at the clock, waiting for the garage door to open, wondering which version of him would walk in first, the one who lied easily, or the one who thought he could still hide. The garage door opened at exactly 6:52. I was standing in the kitchen, hands resting on the back of my chair. When he walked in, he smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. His suitcase was in one hand, his work bag over his shoulder. "You look nice," he said, glancing at the table. I told him to put his things down, wash up, and come eat. He set the suitcase by the door, hung his jacket on the back of a chair, and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the water run, the sound of him drying his hands on the towel. When he came back, he sat in his chair, the envelope still hidden under his plate. He didn't notice. I served the food, asked about his trip. "It went well," he said, cutting into his steak. "They were happy with the presentation. I think it's going to mean more work for us next quarter." I kept my eyes on my plate. "Denver must have been cold." "Yeah," he said, nodding. "Freezing. I barely went outside." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I reached for my glass. "Long meetings, then?" He nodded again, chewing. "All day, both days. You know how it is." The air between us felt heavy, but he didn't seem to notice. He ate quickly, talking about small things, traffic on the way home, a new restaurant a co-worker recommended. I listened and waited for the right moment. When he reached for the last bite, I said, "Before dessert, I have something for you." He smiled. "You didn't have to." I lifted his plate and set it aside. The envelope was there, flat against the tablecloth. I slid it toward him. "Go ahead. Open it." His expression changed instantly. Not shock, not guilt, calculation. He looked at the envelope like it might burn him. "What's this?" "Open it," I repeated. He pulled the flap open and tipped it out. The photograph slid onto the table first. Him at the bar with her in the black dress, her holding the small box. Then came the call logs, the credit card statements, the bank charges. They fanned out between us like pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to see. He didn't touch them. His eyes moved over each page, his jaw tightening. "You've been going through my things." "I've been going through the truth," I said, "and I have all of it now." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "This isn't what it looks like." I let out a breath, not loud enough to be a sigh. "It looks like you've been seeing her for months. It looks like you bought her a bracelet and a ring with our money. It looks like you've been lying about where you are almost every night." His eyes narrowed. "You've been following me?" "I've been watching you," I said, "and you haven't been careful." He stayed quiet for a moment, staring at the ring on the photo. "You don't understand." "No," I said, cutting him off. "I understand exactly. You were supposed to be in Denver on Wednesday. Your car was in her driveway at 12:43. I tapped the notebook I'd brought from the buffet. "I have the time written down." He looked away, rubbing his jaw. His foot started bouncing under the table. "It's complicated." "It's simple," I said. "You're married to me, and you're with her. There's nothing complicated about that." He pushed back from the table, stood up, and walked to the counter. He poured himself water, took a long drink, then set the glass down hard. "She's just a friend." The words were so absurd I almost laughed. "Do you buy all your friends rings?" He didn't answer. "Do you spend hours on the phone with them every night? Do you take them to the same places you take your wife? Do you lie about flying to another state so you can spend 2 days at their house?" His shoulders tensed. He kept his back to me. When he turned around, his face was blank. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth," I said. He shook his head, half smiling in disbelief. "If I tell you the truth, you'll leave." I kept my eyes on him. "That's not your choice anymore." He stared at me for a long time, then looked at the table again. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." I didn't answer. He walked back to his chair and sat down, but he didn't eat. "I met her at a client dinner. She understood things about me that you didn't anymore." The words landed like small stones, not because they hurt, but because they were so practiced, and that's worth destroying our family. He flinched at the word family. I didn't plan for it to happen. I pushed the printed call logs toward him. "You planned enough to talk to her every single day for 6 months. He looked at the paper, then back at me. "So what now?" "You tell me," I said. He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "We could take some time apart, figure things out." I felt my hands curl against the table. "While you keep seeing her?" He didn't deny it. The silence stretched until I stood up. I took the envelope, slid everything back inside, and set it on the counter. "You'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight." His mouth opened like he was going to argue, but he didn't. He stood, took his jacket, and walked down the hall without another word. I stayed at the table long after he was gone, my eyes on the empty plate in front of me. When I finally got up, I cleared the dishes, washed them, and put them away. The envelope stayed on the counter, in plain sight. Around 10, I heard the door to the guest room close. I went upstairs alone. In the quiet, I kept thinking of the way he'd looked at the photographs. Not shocked, not sorry, just caught. And I knew that whatever came next, that look wasn't going to change. I woke up before sunrise. The guest room door was still shut, and the house was silent. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dresser. The necklace was inside, hidden under a scarf. I didn't take it out. Downstairs, the envelope was still on the counter where I'd left it. I made coffee and sat at the table with the black notebook. I opened it to the last page and wrote the date, underlining it twice. Then I wrote a single sentence. He admitted nothing. At 7, I heard the guest room door open. He walked into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep. "Morning," he said, like nothing had happened. I didn't answer right away. I sipped my coffee and watched him take a glass from the cabinet. "We should talk," he said. I set my cup down. "Then talk." He stood there for a moment, then leaned against the counter. "I'm sorry for how this looks." I kept my eyes on him. "You're sorry I saw it, not sorry you did it." He shook his head. "That's not fair. I care about you. I care about our family. I've just been confused." "Confused doesn't explain a ring on her hand," I said. His jaw tightened. "You keep bringing that up." "Because it means something," I said. "It means you made her a promise, whether you said the words or not." He didn't reply. After a few seconds, he said, "I'll end it with her." I stayed quiet. "I mean it," he said. "I'll tell her today. I don't want to lose what we have." "You already lost it," I said. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can..." I stood up, pushing my chair in slowly. "You can start by moving your things into the guest room permanently." His face tightened. "That's not going to help." "It will help me," I said. He didn't say anything else. He picked up his glass of water and walked out of the kitchen. By mid-morning, I called Laura. I told her what had happened, in the shortest version I could manage. She was quiet for a moment, then asked if I needed her to take the kids for the weekend. I said no, not yet. I needed them here. The rest of the day passed in short, clipped exchanges between us. He worked in his office. I stayed in the kitchen or upstairs. We avoided looking at each other for too long. That evening, he didn't go out. He made himself a sandwich and ate standing at the counter. I sat at the table with my laptop, scrolling through job postings. Around 10, he knocked on the doorframe. "Can we sit down tomorrow? Really talk?" I closed the laptop. "If you want to tell me the truth, tell me now." He hesitated, then said, "It's over with her." "When did it end?" I asked. "Yesterday," he said. "You were in her driveway Wednesday." His mouth opened, then shut. That was to tell her it was done. I didn't answer. He exhaled slowly. "I know I've hurt you, but I'm not ready to give up on us." I stood up and walked past him without looking back. The next morning, Saturday, he was already gone when I came downstairs. His car wasn't in the driveway. I checked my phone. No message. At 9:45, I saw the notification, a charge at the bar near his office. I stared at it, wondering if she was there too. An hour later, he walked in carrying a coffee. "Went for a drive," he said, like it was nothing. I didn't mention the charge. I wrote it down in the notebook, adding the time and amount. That afternoon, he followed me into the laundry room. "You're not saying much," he said. "There's nothing left to say," I replied. "I'm trying here," he said. "Trying means cutting her out completely," I said. "Trying means honesty without me having to pull it out of you." He leaned against the doorway. "I told you. It's over." "Then why do I still feel like I'm waiting for the next lie?" I asked. He didn't answer. Sunday was more of the same. He stayed home, hovering around the kitchen, offering to help with dinner. I let him slice vegetables while I stirred the pot. Neither of us spoke about the envelope on the counter. That night, as I loaded the dishwasher, he came up behind me. "I'll prove it to you," he said. I turned to face him. "Prove what?" "That she's out of my life." "How?" He hesitated. "You'll see." I didn't press him. I just turned back to the sink and finished rinsing the plates. Monday morning, he left for work earlier than usual. I watched from the window as his car pulled out. 10 minutes later, I opened my laptop and checked the cloud account. No new pictures. The phone bill hadn't updated yet. By noon, I couldn't stop thinking about where he was. I drove toward his office, parking down the block. I waited an hour. He didn't come out. When I finally left, I took the long way home. Passing her street, I slowed just enough to look. Her driveway was empty. No sign of either of them. That night, he came home carrying takeout for all of us. He acted like nothing had happened all week. After the kids went to bed, he sat across from me in the living room. "I meant what I said," he told me. "I'm done with her." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, wondering if I'd ever be able to tell when he was lying again. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight, but if you give me time, I'll make it right." I nodded slowly, but I didn't make any promises. Later, alone in bed, I opened the black notebook and wrote a single line. "He says it's over." I don't believe him. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. He was still asleep beside me, breathing evenly. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anything he said the night before had been real. By the time I got downstairs, He was in the kitchen making coffee. "Morning," he said, like the last week hadn't happened. I poured myself a cup and sat at the table. "Do you have plans after work today?" "Just heading straight home," he said. "No meetings, no late nights?" I nodded but didn't reply. He left at 8. I waited until I heard the garage door close before opening my laptop. The cloud account showed nothing new. The phone bill still hadn't updated. I checked our bank account. No unusual charges in the last 24 hours. By mid-morning, I decided I needed more than his word. I called Laura and asked if she could meet for lunch. We sat in a booth at a diner, my black notebook on the seat beside me. "Is he still seeing her?" she asked. "I don't know," I said, "but I don't trust him, and I can't keep living like I'm waiting for the next lie." She stirred her coffee. "What's your plan?" "I don't have one yet," I admitted. "I'm collecting proof in case I need it, and I want to see if he slips." Laura nodded slowly. "If you want me to follow him one day, I will." I didn't answer right away. The idea made me uneasy, but not because I didn't want the truth, because I already suspected I knew it. That afternoon, I drove past her street. Her car was there, but the driveway was empty, otherwise. No sign of him. I didn't linger. I wrote the time in the notebook and went home. He arrived at 6 on the dot, carrying groceries. "Thought I'd make dinner," he said. I stayed in the kitchen with him while he cooked. He tried to make small talk, asked about my day, mentioned a project at work. I gave short answers. Halfway through dinner, he said, "You're still angry." I set my fork down. "I'm not angry. I'm watching." His eyes narrowed. "Watching for what?" "For you to show me whether you mean what you said." He leaned back in his chair. "I told you, it's over. And I told you I don't believe you yet." He didn't say anything else for the rest of the meal. That night, after he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope. I went through every page again, making sure I hadn't missed anything. Every photo, every statement, every call log was still in place. I slid the papers back inside, sealed it, and returned it to the cookbook shelf. Tuesday morning, I left the house right after he did. I drove to his office and parked where I could see the entrance. At 11:30, he came out, alone, and walked toward the bar near his office. I stayed in my car, watching from a distance. 15 minutes later, she walked up and went inside. I felt my grip tighten on the steering wheel. I stayed parked across the street, watching the door. At 12:10, they came out together. He held the door for her. She laughed at something he said. They didn't touch, but the look between them was enough. I followed them from a distance. They walked 2 blocks to the parking lot where her car was parked. He stood beside her for a moment, leaning on the roof while she unlocked the door. They spoke for less than a minute before she got in and drove away. He didn't return to the office right away. He walked around the corner and sat at an outdoor table of a cafe. I stayed until he finished his coffee, then drove home. That evening, when he walked in, I asked how his day was. "Quiet," he said. "Mostly emails and phone calls." I wrote that down in the notebook, word for word. The rest of the week followed a pattern. He left early, came home on time, said nothing about her. But on Thursday, I checked our bank account and saw another charge at the bar. 2 drinks, late afternoon. I didn't confront him. I just made a note and waited. Friday morning, he mentioned he might work from home the next week. "We could have lunch together," he said, smiling like it was a peace offering. I nodded, but my mind was already working through what that meant. If he stayed home, I'd lose the chance to track him during the day. If I wanted to know for sure, it had to be today. That afternoon, I drove to her street again. Her car was there, parked crooked in the driveway. I didn't see his, but that didn't mean anything. He could have parked nearby. I walked past on the opposite sidewalk, keeping my phone in my hand like I was distracted. The curtains were open in the front room. She was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, phone in hand. I didn't stop walking. Back at home, I wrote the time in the notebook. I added a question mark next to it. When he came home that evening, he brought flowers. "For you," he said, setting them on the counter. I looked at them for a long moment before saying, "Thank you." Over dinner, he said, "We're doing better, aren't we?" I met his eyes. "You're asking the wrong person." He frowned but didn't argue. That night as he slept, I lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, knowing that the next time I caught him, it couldn't just go into the notebook. It would have to mean something. The next morning, he left earlier than usual. He said he had to catch up on things before the weekend. I stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the street, then went straight to the kitchen for my notebook. I flipped to a blank page, wrote the date, and underlined it. By 9:30, I was in my car, heading toward his office. I parked across the street where I could see the main entrance. At 11:40, he walked out. He wasn't alone. She was next to him, sunglasses on, smiling at something he said. They crossed the street together and went into the same bar near his office. My hands were gripping the steering wheel, but I stayed where I was. 10 minutes passed. 15. At 20 minutes, they came out. She was holding a to-go cup. He had nothing in his hands. They walked side by side toward the parking lot. She got into her car. He leaned in, said something, and she laughed again before closing the door. She drove off first. He stood there for a few seconds, looking at his phone, then started walking toward the corner. I started the car and followed him from a distance. Instead of going back to the office, he turned onto a side street and walked 2 blocks to her house. I drove past once just to see. Her car was already there. He went up the steps, knocked lightly, and she let him in. I kept driving until I reached the end of the block, then parked where I could see the side of the house. The curtains were open just enough that I could see them moving inside. Him setting something on the counter, her pouring something into 2 glasses. I stayed there for nearly an hour. They didn't leave the house. I wrote the time in the notebook, along with a note. Entered house at 12:19 p.m., still inside at 1:15 p.m. When I finally drove away, my mind was already on the envelope in the kitchen. The last time I'd shown him proof, he had denied it, twisted it, made it about me going through his things. This time I wanted to leave no space for him to breathe. That evening, he came home right on time. He kissed my cheek like always, asked how my day was. I said fine, and didn't look up from the sink. Over dinner, he talked about work. I didn't say much. When the plates were cleared, he leaned back in his chair. We should do something together this weekend. Just us. I met his eyes. We can talk about it tomorrow. He nodded, not pushing it. After he went to bed, I pulled the envelope from the cookbook. I added the new notes and printed the photos I'd taken that afternoon from my phone. I placed them in order with the others, the bar receipts next to the pictures of them walking out together. On Saturday morning, I told him I needed to run errands. Instead, I drove to her street. Both cars were there. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. Natas, at 11:50, he came out alone, wearing the same jacket he'd left home in. He looked around before getting into his car and driving off. I followed him, keeping 3 cars between us. He drove to a shopping plaza, parked, and went into a store. 10 minutes later, he came out with a small bag. I couldn't see the logo from where I was, but it was a jewelry store. He didn't go home. He drove straight back to her street and parked in the driveway. I watched him carry the bag to the door. She opened it before he could knock. He stepped inside without hesitation. I wrote the time and details in my notebook, underlining jewelry bag. That night, when he came home, he seemed lighter, almost cheerful. He made small talk, helped with the dishes, and suggested we watch a movie. I agreed, even though my mind was on the notes I'd just added to the envelope. Sunday morning, I told him I was meeting Laura for brunch. I actually drove back to her street. Her car was there, but his wasn't. I drove around the block once, then went home. He was in the living room when I came in, watching TV. "How was brunch?" he asked. "Fine," I said, and walked upstairs. The rest of the day passed without anything unusual. He stayed home, cooked dinner, even made dessert. If I hadn't seen what I'd seen over the last week, I could almost believe him. Almost. Monday morning, I decided I was done collecting, without acting. I called Laura and told her I'd need her to take the kids after school on Wednesday. I didn't explain why. I spent the rest of the day making sure everything in the envelope was in perfect order. Photos, statements, call logs, and now the pictures from the last 2 times I'd followed him. I placed the black notebook on top, the most recent entries flagged with a paperclip. When I closed the envelope, it felt heavier than before, but not because of the paper. It was the weight of everything I'd been carrying since the first night I saw that unknown number on the phone bill. Wednesday was coming, and I knew I wasn't going to give him the option to talk his way out of this again. On Wednesday morning, the house felt too quiet. He left just after 7, kissing me on the cheek before heading to the garage. I waited until I heard his car pull away before moving. I called Laura to confirm she could take the kids after school. She said yes, still not asking why. I told her I would drop them off around 4. The rest of the morning, I went through the envelope one last time. Everything was there. The oldest phone records, the first photos I'd saved from the cloud, the bank statements, the notes from every time I'd followed him. The pictures from last week were at the top, the jewelry bag clearly visible in one of them. By noon, the table was set for 2. I wasn't cooking tonight. There wouldn't be dinner. I just wanted the table to be the place where it ended. At 3:30, I picked the kids up from school and drove them straight to Laura's. I told them I had work to do at home and kissed them goodbye. My hands were tight on the steering wheel all the way back. When I walked into the house, the air felt still. I put the envelope in the center of the table, the flap facing his seat. I sat down across from it and waited. He came in at 5:40, earlier than usual. He looked surprised to see me at the table with nothing in front of me. "Where are the kids?" he asked. "At Laura's," I said. He set his bag down. "What's going on?" I gestured toward the envelope. "You're going to open that, and then you're going to tell me if there's anything left you want to say." He frowned, pulling the envelope closer. He opened it slowly, like last time, but this time I didn't look away. The photos slid out first. Him at the bar with her, walking to her car, entering her house with the jewelry bag in his hand. The phone records were next, pages covered in the same number repeated again and again. The bank statements with the jewelry store charges highlighted. my black notebook with the most recent dates marked. His hands hovered over the pile without touching anything. His eyes scanned the top page, then moved to me. "You've been following me," he said. "I've been watching you," I corrected. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "This is extreme." "No," I said. "Extreme is buying another woman a ring while you're married to me. Extreme is lying about trips and meetings so you can spend the day at her house. This is just the truth, printed on paper." His jaw flexed, but he didn't speak. "You told me it was over," I said. "You said you'd cut her out completely. These dates are after that conversation." He looked at the photos again, then back at me. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," I said. He sat back in his chair. "So what now? You've built your case. What's the verdict?" I didn't answer right away. I kept my eyes on him until the silence stretched too long for him to hold. "You want a divorce?" he asked finally. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. "I want you out of this house, tonight." His mouth tightened. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore," I said. He looked down at the table, at the evidence spread between us. His fingers tapped once on the envelope, then stopped. "You've been planning this," he said quietly. "I've been preparing for the moment you couldn't lie your way out of it," I said. For a second his face went blank, then hardened. "You think you know everything?" "I know enough," I repeated. He pushed the chair back and stood. "Fine. I'll pack a bag." I didn't move as he walked past me. His footsteps went upstairs, the sound of the closet door opening, drawer sliding. 15 minutes later, he came back down with a duffel bag over his shoulder. At the door, he paused. "You're making a mistake." I didn't answer. He opened the door and stepped out. The garage door rumbled as it closed behind him. I sat there for a long time, the envelope still on the table between the two empty chairs. The clock on the wall ticked softly in the quiet. When the sound of his car faded down the street, I reached for the envelope, slid everything back inside, and sealed it. I placed it on the buffet, out of sight but not out of reach. I didn't touch the table. I didn't clear it. I just turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs. The guest room door was open now, the bed unmade. His pillow was still indented. I shut the door without going in. Down the hall, my own bedroom felt bigger than it had that morning. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet. The necklace was still in the dresser. I didn't take it out. What would you do in my place? Please write your thoughts in the comments. I will be happy to read them.